Thank you, everybody.
Okay, it is 12:09 and we are going to start the VCBB meeting of, what day is it? December 13th. Quick roll call. We have Holly Groshner is at the Public Service Department with Christine, Executive Director. Other board members, Brian Otley, Dan Nelson, and myself are attending virtually. And Laura is not on, is that correct?
Yeah, she's joining us at 12:30.
Okay. And additional staff, in addition to Christine and Rob, we have Stan. And I think that's everybody from staff and board. All right, so with that, let's kick off the meeting. First item on the agenda is we already did the roll call to order and review of the agenda. Are there any changes to the December 13th agenda? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve? I'll move that we approve the agenda as provided by Rob. Give a second.
Second.
Give a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Agenda is set. First item on our agenda is approval of the November 22nd board meeting minutes. Holly, you have a question?
I have mentioned this to Christine, but I would highly recommend that the last sentence above Roman numeral 4 on what is numbered page 1, the word is should be changed as amended to as amended.
Okay, that works for me. Any other discussion? How about a motion to approve the November 22nd meeting minutes?
I move to approve 11/22 minutes as amended.
I'll second that.
Holly Grosh.
And second is Patty Richards. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. I'm sorry, the meeting minutes are approved. The third item on our agenda is the 2021 and 2022 budget, VCBB budget. Christine, do you want to kick this off?
Sure. Yeah, this is I think you'll see we've been through this budget pretty much in detail. One of the things I'll point out on the cover page, which kind of was a carryover from when I originally started this budget way back, I think it was in October. On the budget narrative, the fourth bullet down doesn't apply anymore. I should have deleted that. Funds for pre-purchasing
what page are we on the?
We're on the first page, page 2.
It's page 33 of the board packet.
Thank you, Polly.
Yeah.
And for those at home, the board packet is posted on the VCBB website as usual.
So if you look at the fourth bullet down, that no longer applies. Thank you, Rob, for your excellent leadership on that. Because we're using a letter of credit to get those materials purchased. As you may recall, in the beginning, we were looking at possibly getting grant funds to the CUDs. But this letter of credit has resolved that question. So the budget year, what the budget doesn't take into consideration is it basically is what we know today. We know we have 150 million from Act 71. I have a high level of confidence because of my discussions with the Office of Finance and Management that we'll be getting 116 million from the infrastructure bill that has passed. What we don't know is what we're going to get from what's called the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. That has $42.5 billion into it. And those are competitive grants. So with this budget, we plan to be well prepared when those funds become available in May to pull down as much as we can for the state of Vermont and the broadband projects. And that will be the role of the broadband project developer to help do that. So there could be significant additional funding coming. But again, it depends on the work that we do in terms of applying for it.
So Christine, can you say that again? It's 160 million from the infrastructure bill. Is that what you said?
116 million, yep, from the infrastructure bill. That's the minimum that the states will get.
116 million.
So how firm is that, Christine? Just because as I read through this in the 2-year look, you know, I think we need to be very intentional about what funds are in hand or secured, you know, kind of 100% locked up, and which ones are, even though they may be highly probable, they're not exactly locked up yet. So,
okay.
so I don't know if we color code these or put asterisks on them, but I just, since all of these agendas and board materials are dated, and it'll change over time, I just think for this one, the 116, I was unclear as to how firm that is. But I think we should have some sort of convention to indicate what's locked down and 100% in our control, and what is still out there that we're working hard on, but isn't 100% in our control yet.
Okay, got it. That's fine. And that 116.
So how would you characterize the 116, please? I
would characterize it as highly confident, but not locked down. The reason I say it's highly confident.
Yeah. Do you have a date when you expect that will resolve itself to either be locked down or some other status?
Well, it'll probably, I'm not, so what happens is the administration recommends a budget to the legislature, and the legislature votes on the budget. So it probably, won't be March till we can maybe even beyond that, but it's the end of the legislative session when we'll have confidence on that.
Okay, so that would be something worth noting along with that, whatever year that is, the second year budget.
Yep.
Holly, you have a comment?
I have both a question and a comment. I'm so glad that Brian brought this up, and I hope that you will flag numbers that are uncertain or have a condition precedent as we go along.
Yeah.
I will do that.
And I would like to know whether you've gotten guidance about what the process is for those federal dollars coming to us. Is it a legislative act, or is it an executive branch act that puts those dollars into particular funding mechanisms?
Now, when you say federal dollars, are you talking about the minimum 116 million that's guaranteed to the state, or the 42.5 billion total of the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program?
Well, I guess both, because what I don't understand is whether the legislature has to take action for any of those federal dollars from the big bucket. I understand that our state's allocation has been determined, but does the legislature have the opportunity to vote on where it wants that funding to go specifically?
Yes, it does have the option.
Thank you.
The governor makes the recommendation, but the legislature does have the option. Now, the funds that are coming, the reason that the Office of Finance has committed it to broadband is because it's very narrow what that money can be used for. And broadband is specifically one of those things it can be used for. And so
I understand that, but the legislature often has many ideas.
Yes, thank you, Holly. That's important for us all to know. We're still going to have to fight hard, or you can look at staff. Our job is to fight hard to make sure those funds come to us, because we've been pretty consistent about the minimum we need in order to get this done.
Well, one of the conversations that I had with some folks who are knowledgeable about the infrastructure bill and about the broadband equity component in the last few days centered around what the criteria are for us for satisfaction of the funding. So I said that very badly, but it isn't just that you get the dollars and you build broadband. There are criteria in the funding bill, and I'm wondering if you or Stan will be advising the board on what the criteria are, because the board might need to be ready with some additional activities or recommendations to the legislature in its January report for how to meet those criteria.
Yeah, I will take that as advisory and take that as good advice. So yes, Stan and I will work closely on that.
Thanks. And we'll hear from you in the January meeting, or I don't know, Patty, when you intend to draft our report to the legislature.
We have to have the report to the legislature by January 15th. And Patty, don't worry, I think that's my job, but I don't think.
Well, we have to approve it.
Yeah, you have to approve it, right? So good point. Thank you, Holly, for reminding me of some very important work I have to do.
I know, along with a long list, I know.
But yes, very good point. So Rob, we're going to need to fit that in the, I guess, the early January meeting schedule for you to review the report. Oh, you're on mute, Patty.
So going back to the budget, what I'm hearing is the 116 million we're going to flag as a planned for, but not necessarily certain revenue allocation to VCBB.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't think, remember that budget starts, that budget year starts on July 1st. So you don't necessarily need to approve that budget yet. In fact, I would encourage you not to approve the 2023 budget, but definitely we should be working on the 2022 budgets. So, in fact, maybe the recommendation is that you don't, by June 30th, of course, we will be firm on those numbers because the governor has to sign the budget. So I guess I'm going to recommend to the board not to approve that budget till we have some firmness around the funding.
But so Christine, I'm a little confused now. So we should be approving at least the 2021 budget, which we're going to close out here
Right.
in a couple of weeks. What I hear you saying is to wait on the budget that begins July 1 of 2022, correct?
That's correct. Yep. That's the one we're not firm on.
Okay.
The numbers in this budget are relatively firm, except for we'll talk about the Northern Regional, the NRBC grant for capacity, because Rob's working on that. But other than that,
the numbers in front of us in the packet go through June 30th, 2022, correct?
yes.
Okay. All right, do you want to keep walking us through this?
Yes. Okay. So that's the narrative. If you go to the next page, which is 34 in your book, we have the capital budget. And these numbers are firm except for one, which is these are firm. It's the it's the operating budget we have an exception on. These numbers are firm.
Okay, anybody have questions on this section of the capital budget, which is on page 34 of our packet, and it's capital revenue and capital expenses?
Just remind me the construction coordination fund, Christine, the 5 million. So pre-construction and grant, I get that. The construction grant program, I get that.
Fund, what we're recommending is this be done at, I I only see the only way to do this really is at the state level. We're recommending setting aside a fund so that we could coordinate with the Agency of Transportation and the electric utilities to be able to lay conduit when they are doing projects, because it's likely not to fall within the phased construction plans of the CUD themselves, but we don't want to miss the opportunity to be able to lay, 1.5-inch conduit with pull string, because it's so cheap to do when somebody's got the ground tore up. So we'll coordinate at the state level with the AOT and the utilities and exchange those plans, and then make sure we get conduit buried wherever conduit could be buried. And it saves significant money on make ready.
Yeah, so I get that. So, but the VCBB will be doing that, or that's $5 million that will be available to the CUDs or other applicants to make sure it gets done while they're coordinating with AOT and other entities like that would have ground open.
Well, I'm recommending that the VCBB do it at the state level, because the problem is these don't line up with the CUD construction schedules.
And we're still trying to get a handle on what the schedule is and what different construction projects are happening. We get emails every few weeks to say, oh, is there an opportunity for coordination here? Or does this conflict?
Yep.
We just want to be able to seize that opportunity. And in some cases, it may be, most cases, it may be working with whoever that contractor is that's doing the water main project, of add in the conduit, for instance. Or there's one project that came across last week that was for a mobile home park up in northwestern Vermont. Well, yeah, laying conduit is super expensive, and that's an affordability issue. So it's more of a fund that it will have to be flexible, but allow us to take advantage of those scenarios where we could realize some real cost savings.
Okay, and is this the first time that line item is showing up in the budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Just wanted to recognize Laura has joined us.
And have we gotten any feedback from the CUDs about that $5 million fund and that concept you guys just described?
No.
We have not yet. This was one thing going over the budget we realized was missing, and we needed to add that in there and address.
Okay. I think we should get feedback from at least VCUDA or the CUDs directly, just either confirmation or clarification or whatever on that line item.
Okay.
Brian, in what sense? That's enough?
No, just so I understand the intent. Again, my bias is always going to be towards empowering the CUDs to do more and have VCBB doing less. So I just want to talk through if, Rob may get an email making aware a coordination opportunity, just like he described, right? So that's great. I love that. But is it best fulfilled then by VCBB doing something, or then coordinating in the host CUD, wherever that project is, and having them factor that into their planning, including making available some of this $5 million in funds? So just, I think they should, maybe it's a simple feedback thing, Patty. Maybe, Will or the CUD say, yep, we're clear on this. The way you guys are describing it is great. We're all in. Great. It'll be a very simple discussion.
Holly, you have a comment?
Not on this. I have a question when you're done on this.
Brian, would you envision that we could approve this version of the budget and then take feedback on the $5 million after we've approved it? Or you want to hold this up for approval until we get comments?
Is there a way to approve it with a contingency on that somehow? I don't want to hold up the works, but again, it's the first time we're seeing the line item. We've never seen it before. That always gives me pause.
Okay.
And it seems like in the example Christine and Rob gave, it seems like VCBB could be put in a position to make decisions on the ground that would have future impact to CUD planning and construction that they may not be aware of. So that's a disconnect that concerns me. Yeah, Dan, you gotta.
Well, I'd like to add, I applaud the intent, and I really appreciate that. But who would end up owning that asset, and then later we would want to grant that over to someone,
Right.
Who we don't know. So to Brian's point, perhaps the money belongs in there, but it has to be directed to someone who's going to take ownership and manage that asset, or perhaps it's not necessary, but it's good intent.
Yeah,
so Holly has her hand up. Holly, do you have a comment on this 5 million, or do you want to not?
My question goes back to the 116 and whether this is just happenstance that we have a 116 million construction grant program here, and we just talked about the 116 million from the other legislation that's uncertain. I'm just confused by that. So that's the nature of my question. It's not about the 5 million.
Yeah, so let me just say.
So hold on, Christine. Holly, hold that thought.
Yep.
Laura, do you have a comment about the 5 million? All right, Christine, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the recommendations of Dan and Brian. I think they're good ones. I actually think that that's a better approach. So we'll talk to the CUDs about that. I think it'd be a better approach for us to have the funding, but them own the infrastructure. No question about it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, just tying that off is the right thing to do. But I think the intent of the funding makes good sense.
Yep. Good.
Okay. All right, Holly, let's go back to you on the 116 million.
Is this just happenstance or you know, where does that 116 million come from? Is that the projection of federal funding in the future?
No, that's the first time I've noticed it, a very interesting coincidence. That 116 million is a result of taking the original 153 million above from revenues, subtracting out the budget, the pre-construction grant program, the connective, well, not the connectivity grants, those come from the universal fund, but if you subtract it all, it comes out to 116,250.
Thank you.
Okay, Laura? Okay, no questions. Christine, you still have the floor.
Okay, so that's the overall budget for capital. I think we've gone through that. Can I move to the next page, which is the operating budget?
Go right ahead.
So the operations budget, that's where I was going to say that these numbers are firm with the exception of the Northern Borders Regional Commission Forest, the RFEP. And Rob, you want to talk briefly about what you're doing with that?
Sure. Hold on, let me unmute here. Sure. Well, they are firm. The total amounts of the grants are firm. For the Rural Forest Economy Partnership Grant, that is the grant that will pay for the broadband project developer position, which we learned today is very close to being posted, which is exciting. It will also be used for resources for them to leverage and for us to leverage. And this is where that broadband intelligence system that we're calling it. It's a web-based system. It involves a lot of mapping. It automates some of the evaluation of various designs. It also overlays all the different funding requirements for the various federal programs. It can be used to identify projects, to leverage projects. It's also going to be used for reporting out what we are doing. The RFP has not been issued yet. There's drafts. It takes a while in state government to get these issued, but it's an investment that would allow us to be more efficient, more effective, and allow this position a lot more tools at their disposal. We'll work hand in hand with our GIS contract and with any grant writers as well. So it's a multi-purpose item. And then there's some money remaining in there for additional consulting expenses to allow us to continue to leverage more additional federal funds, additional investments, and to make this thing happen. But that's the RFEP grant proposal. The other Northern Borders is 1.25, and it's a state capacity grant, and that is another RFP we have to have out there that goes to a single CUD, single project involving public and private partners as a way to boost that effort.
Yeah.
These funds may be available. There's capacity funds available every year. We still have additional conversations to have to find out if it's going to become more of an annual thing or if this is what we have right now.
Yeah, not to confuse you with that 1.25 million, because that was in the capital side of the budget. So now we're talking about the operations side of the NBRC grant. So that's the expense. Shall I go through tab by tab now on
Yeah, go right through this whole thing.
Okay, so let's move to the personnel tab. And I don't see the personnel tab in here.
Well, we're reading along in the book. There's a section called personnel. Is that what
Right.
you're?
Page 37.
Yeah, but I don't see the, unfortunately, I don't see the.
Are you expecting a spreadsheet?
The spreadsheet, yeah. Do you have the spreadsheet in your packet?
No.
No.
I'm going to pull that up here.
But we have the numbers.
Oh yeah, you have numbers here.
Christine, aren't you going to do the narrative on, you know, the?
Yes. Yeah, but let me pull up the, well, yeah, let me just, but I want to pull up the budget too. So as we talk through this, so I'll share my screen. It's easier for me to talk for the budget. I'm sorry.
So far, we're not seeing your screen, Christine.
Yeah, I'll be there in one moment.
Okay.
While you're looking that up, if I may ask Rob a question.
Go ahead, Dan.
I presume with the software that we're buying that we've notified the GIS company. They'll probably have an adder to their proposal.
They will have to be providing some of the data, but they're going to be working very closely, but it doesn't change anything with what we're asking them to do. As I said, we're still working on the RFP and coordinating all this, mapping things.
I just want to avoid the possibility that software solves the problem, that we have an owner of the tool and I'm not sure who's going to get named, but.
Okay, do you see the spreadsheet in front of you?
Right now, Christine, we just see the file.
Oh,
we see your folders.
Sorry about that. Hang on. Okay, try this. Do you see it now?
We do.
Excellent. Okay. So if you look at the grants administrator, the executive director, the general counsel, the executive assistant, those have already been approved and taken care of. And the broadband project developer you've approved. And let me just say, you know, again, congratulations for Rob to be to becoming the deputy director. That we can talk about in executive session how that went about. But that deputy director will need to get some minor language changes in Act 71 so the Universal Service Fund can fund that. But I don't see a problem with that, getting that language change. So the only new personnel item we need to discuss is the project manager. And what I'm looking at as the project manager is for that project manager to be starting in the spring when construction is happening. And coordination of this, their job is really to work with all the project managers and all the CUDs in order to make sure the entire state is on schedule, as well as work with the towns, and to be identifying any problems that are occurring so we can work on those problems. So this is the only new position other than that you have not approved.
Holly?
So I'm just a little bit at a loss because I don't have job descriptions for these various roles. And I'm just curious how you see the project manager interfacing with the deputy director. Is it the same or different? And I will say it's because in my mind's eye, and I could be naive about this, we're going to get to a point where the grant process is set up and staff work is all about the project management.
And then there's also the project developer, role as well. So between those three, Holly, I agree with you. There's a little, it's not clear in my mind.
But the reason you're not hearing it from, because it's not necessarily clear in my mind either. Because what's evolved from us, from early on to where we are today, I've kept this project manager in place because, and it comes again from the original budget proposal I did. But I agree with you. Rob, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts were that the project manager is going to be a position that we're just holding on that position depending on which projects come up. Like we're going to need to do more in terms of affordability. There's going to be new responsibilities coming from the infrastructure bill. There's going to be other areas where we need to have additional focused information, focused attention. In other words, I'm not sure the time frame for when that position would be hired. Ideally, by the middle of next month, we're going to be at what we would consider full staff. We have made an offer and that was accepted to the executive assistant position, and we will soon be posting the project developer. At that point, I think we'll be in good shape.
And would it be fair to say the project developer is more construction oriented in monitoring the details and the specifics of the actual construction work?
Yes, it would, except we've again, we've moved, well, actually, you've moved me anyway. Maybe the board was already there, but to becoming more, less dependent on the VCBB for these services. So the point being, if we've got good grant reporting and we've got a good, and we've got good software and we're following those, I don't see why we would have to do this.
But Christine, do you not need somebody to manage grants and deal with kind of more of the high level stuff, which is what I would see Rob doing? And then the project manager is doing more of the refined, monitoring the construction out in the field.
Well, that was the intent. That is the intent, but I'm not sure we need it. I think I'm going to recommend withdrawing it from this year's budget. As Rob has said, we're going to be in better shape in January. And as I think it was Brian that brought up earlier, I don't remember who brought it up, but the point that gets me thinking is that if we have good reporting in place and we've got this software in place that we're seeking for reporting, and we get the reporting done in a proper time, we should not need a project manager.
Perhaps while you're looking to fill the developer's position, you could look for those qualities that a project manager would have and fill both roles with one position.
Yeah, perhaps, and I'd rather be conservative. So I guess, Rob, before I want to give you an opportunity to say this before we finalize removing it. Are you okay with removing it, Rob?
I would rather hold it to see how things develop, because we are already putting quite the set of skill requirements on the broadband project developer position. So I'd rather keep it in, even if it's as a contingency, rather than a position that we are planning on hiring imminently.
Yeah, and since we make speaking to the board here, are you okay with leaving it in with an understanding that it's a placeholder, and we'll report back before we go out and get this position, we'll report back to you by March on whether we need it or not.
Yeah, this feels
Patty.
weird to me.
Patty?
Go ahead, Laura. I'm not seeing you, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So let me just see if I can clarify. So I think that we have that a grant was awarded from NBRC for a broadband project developer, and that grant has been moved over to VCBB. So the work that was told was necessary to NBRC still exists. We still have the grant here. We're moving it over, and we need to figure out how that integrates with the rest of our activities. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So then we're not debating the need for this role. Is that right?
We're talking about the project manager role.
Yeah, it goes to whether I would say there's no harm, no foul, removing it or leaving it in.
The project manager?
Yeah, because we don't know really if this is going to be needed. We have this software package we're looking for that we haven't quite settled on. We're going to do an RFP that's supposed to help us with reporting. So the idea behind this is to make sure that the CUDs are all on schedule in terms of their construction. We also want to hear any possible problems that might be getting in the way of their construction schedules so that we can help as early as possible. And the question is, do we need a project manager to do this? Well, in conventional projects, you use a project manager. But I'm not 100% confident we need this role. But I'm also not 100% confident we should take it out either.
So can I make?
I would
Yeah,
recommend,
go ahead, Patty.
if this is not, it's still gray and uncertain, I'd recommend taking it out. You can always come back in and get an amendment to the budget later.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll show a budget surplus of $34,700.
That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, either way is fine, I think. Whatever the board's most comfortable with.
What do other board members think?
Take it out.
I like your approach, Patty.
Okay. All right, let's do that. We'll take it out, and if you find later on you need it, then we'll come back and we'll take it up.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep looking us through, Christine.
Nope, that's it for this page because everything else has been pretty much approved. Moving to equipment and software. This portable, I don't know how much detail you want on this one, but
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Why don't we do that? Anybody have questions or comments? Laura, your hand is up.
Nope, sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Supplies. I don't know if anybody would comment on this one. That's just
Oh,
paper.
I think we need to dig in deeply on this one. I'm good.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, we'll keep moving.
Contracted services. You've already approved the GIS support. We're talking about specialized legal support, which we think we're going to need, especially when we get into the issue of bonding and financing.
Is Stan weighed in on that? Stan, are you comfortable with that line item?
At this point, yes, I am.
Okay. Holly has a question.
I have no comment about the legal services. I know it's a shock. But I do have this question. There's no contract budget for communications management or managing a website for this activity or getting the word out generally. If we were to have an educational component to this, to the functions of this organization. So my question to you is this, we might be including discrete marketing budgets for particular educational initiatives like a seminar or something. But what is the board's thought about generally having having more public visibility for the work, and shouldn't that be the subject of a separate line item, or not, because this is a state-related agency and we just don't do that?
Can I speak to that? We'll talk more about that in the update, but the candidate that we have selected and has agreed to take the position of executive assistant brings together a lot of background in terms of media, in terms of reaching out to the public, in terms of website development, publications, you name it. So the board sent us on a mission to find somebody that could grow in their position, and I'm very happy to say I think we found the perfect candidate. So that's one of the reasons why there's no line item in here at this time.
That's great news. And when does she start, Rob?
She starts right after the new year. We're still finalizing everything, but she has accepted the offer.
Excellent. Laura, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Roles. And this legal support, how they work together. If it's clear like what the difference is between the two and how we would see them showing up.
Well, I didn't catch the entire comment. Can you state that again?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm having a hard time on my computer in my office, but I am. How Stan's position and the legal support interact together. Are we clear on what we would be using Stan versus legal support for?
Well, let me just say that, again, I didn't anticipate getting somebody as qualified as Stan for this job. So, I want to keep the money in there because this might be an example of where, you might need some special FCC expertise, or we might need special expertise on, municipal revenue bonds. But then again, I've got a pretty high level of confidence that Stan, with his background, can figure these things out. But Stan, I'll have you weigh in on that. Stan, what are your thoughts?
Holly, I'm going to let them finish.
My thoughts are that I would try to do as much as I can here myself, and then if there are any areas where we would need a backstop, that's what that fund would be used for.
And Stan and Christine, I would envision that Stan would manage this end of the budget in consultation with Christine, but Stan, really look to you to suggest and lead us through that process.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, Holly?
I just want to support both Christine's comments and Stan's comments. Not only will we need FCC competence, public funding competence, potential litigation. There are, how many lawyers fit into this activity? Let me count the ways. But it will be essential for Stan to have some access to resources, because as good as Stan's credentials are, no lawyer is highly qualified in all of these very narrow niches. So
That's very true.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this section of the budget, the legal? Right. Christine, you want to keep going?
Yeah, we talked about the need for a fiber optic engineer. I don't believe we need that person full time, but we certainly want that person available to review the construction plans. But again, I don't see that as a full-time position. So contract, 33%.
Mm-hmm.
I put in contingency here.
Right, any comments, questions?
I also want to say, since the contingency would go up if the project manager position is not being funded, because I think there is potential that we're going to need this fiber optic engineer quite a bit more.
I'm not sure what you need the engineer for, because I think that's the CUDs should be doing. However, I think the money should stay there, because I think getting the tools that you are planning to acquire and the integration with the other GIS tools will take some effort. So the way it's described, I don't know as though you'll use those dollars exactly that way, but instead maybe getting some of the tools that you have to be effective or plan to get. My 2 cents on that.
Okay, anybody else?
Patty,
Yes.
can I just ask, I mean, so I think Dan's question is, good question. So, we would expect that work to be happening at the CUD level. So how does this engineer intersect or interact with the CUD level work?
Well, we see the fiber optic engineer as reviewing the various plans, everything from the high level design to the detailed design, to looking at the network as it's coming together to see where there's additional opportunities to increase redundancy, or if there are gaps. So that's where we see the fiber optic engineer fitting in. There's another set of eyes on the plans we're approving.
Yeah, and I would add too that there's where each CUD is developing its own network, but we really need to take a look at this from a statewide look to see where our interconnections are with regional networks. And another secondary aspect of this is to bring additional connections to the state of Vermont so we can reduce the bulk cost of data. And I'm thinking one particular project that I can't talk about here, but we've got other major projects that are coming through the state that they'll be looking for state level guidance and help on.
Holly?
I I support this line item because we're in the business of building fiber and we don't have this expertise in our midst. And so it's appropriate to have somebody with fiber specific expertise that's available to us. It's also, in terms of grant performance, really essential to have somebody who can validate and verify that we're meeting performance criteria under the grant. And so I think to not have this protection for the expenditure of our grant dollars would be a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Let me be clear what I meant by my statement. I don't think we should take the money out. I think you'll find yourself redirecting some of the function from what you've described here to other functions that might be more broadly. The dollars should stay there, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if I might, I would just offer a clarification. We are actually not in the business of building fiber. We are in the business of supporting and providing oversight to the Vermonters that are building fiber. And I also support having this resource there. I would encourage staff to make sure that this resource and tool is deployed in a way that is helpful and not punitive. And so that it is engaging early and not late.
That's well said.
Yeah, good advice.
Thank you,
Right.
Laura.
All right, any other comments? The fiber optic engineer or contingency, anything under contracted services, section 7. So you want to keep going, Christine?
Yep. Going to training and education. Well, there are two major summits that we're looking at having some staff attend, but really providing scholarships to the CUD members to attend as well. But what I'd like to talk about first, let's talk about the big number here, which is the support of the statewide workforce development program. NEK Broadband has taken the leadership, but we're in the process right now of establishing training to start in February for fiber optic technicians. That's work that's being done with VTC, as well as some of the electric utilities have committed. We're saying we want to fund that and get that going, but at the same time, this funding is going to be used to leverage significantly additional funding. We've started the request, and you'll hear us. We talked about it at the press conference this morning, and I've met with last Friday with the quarterly workforce development board meeting with this topic, and it was well received. We're meeting this week with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, we're working with Department of Labor on what's called the Career Impact Bond. If the state of Vermont can come up with $10 million total, we can start getting matching funds from other philanthropic organizations. Specifically, Social Finance has already committed $2 million. So the Career Impact Bond is how to fund training and build I'm trying to say, find the right word to say it. I'll call it a labor pipeline for career development programs, so people can get into the fiber, start as a fiber technician, grow on to IT jobs, grow into electric utility line worker jobs. And it's about providing opportunity for people with low income who are working in low wage jobs or employment challenged. And it's a pay it forward fund. So what happens is people go through the training. The cost of the training is borne by the program. They get a higher paying job. Between their employer and the employee who has the now has a higher paying job, they pay back the cost of that training over a 5-year period. And that training includes paying them to go to training. And we work with telecommunications providers and construction companies to have a position for them to go to. And if they fail at the program, it doesn't cost them anything. That's where the program takes the hit. But these takes these training dollars and stretches them 2 or 3 times. And it turns out this program is developing some great interest because it applies to all sectors of the Vermont economy. So this will work, not that this is what we're interested in doing, but we're interested in the state of Vermont taking this on as a whole, as a program. And we have a fiber optic technician subset of that program, but it can apply the medical field and nursing, diesel technicians, electric vehicle technicians. It's a whole program for the state. Now, we got into this because we were focused on fiber, fiber technicians. But if it can benefit the entire state, we're happy. So anyway, we make this investment. The state makes a $10 million investment. Social finance makes $2 million investment. And we set up a program by the state. We're looking at the Department of Labor to run this program.
Holly, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just referencing in support of this activity, section 8083, subsection B3, which allows the Vermont Community Broadband Fund to use funding for communications workforce training and development. It says specifically in consultation with the Commissioner of Labor, to the extent such funds are not available from other funding sources. So Christine, I take your comments to be that A, you have agreed with the Commissioner of Labor that this is an appropriate approach, and B, yes, there are not other sources for funding.
Yeah, yes, I've been working closely with Michael Harrington, and as of now, there are no other sources of funding.
So I'm just trying to get that in the minutes so that we have validated that.
So Laura, before I go to you, I just want to make sure, are we going to be able to earmark the funds from the VCBB in the training aspect toward telecom related work rather than spending our funds? I mean, the state may leverage other dollars to support nursing, other technical trades. I'm just curious if our funds would be diluted to any sort of use or just telecom?
This is just telecom. This is specifically for telecom. In fact, this is money that doesn't exist for telecom. However, what I'm trying to do is say it's a match to these other programs so that we can attract even greater outside money. So we'll use this for fiber optic technicians as a subset of a future program.
As long as our dollars do get a reservation for the telecom side, something related to the communication and the fiber work that we're doing, I would not want to support. Those are good programs for sure that the state could take on, but I wouldn't want our dollars diluted down because we really do need to beef up that workforce on the telecommunication side.
Yeah, this is specifically to kick off the fiber optic training. This is not being used for programs.
Okay. Laura?
Yep. So with that program, can you walk me through how the various entities that need those workers engage with this program and how quickly they would have new workers and how many?
Okay, so
facilities and the
so
how do they engage with it and how quickly will they see new workers?
So we're focused right now on an immediate need, which is next year's construction season. We estimate the total need of fiber technicians is is 200 technicians for the entire state. Now, there's a large fallout in this because, so out of those 200 technicians, 150 would be outside technicians, 50 inside technicians. Of the 150 outside technicians, there's a significant fallout in the training. About half of the people drop out of the training because they find out they can't work from heights. So in other words, you've got to train 300 to get 150. So you're looking at having to train like 375 people to get the 200 that you need. So we need to, we need to start that right away. In fact, we're late. I wish we could have started that last summer, but we're starting that training in February. That's
So,
being
Christine?
Yes.
So my question is more specifically around, so all of the existing utilities, they already have some means or ways that they are trying to access new employees, and they have some sense of how they are most successfully able to attract new employees. And so my question is really around how our employers that will employ these people, how they engage with this program. So where do they kind of plug in?
So we're working with the department. We worked with the Department of Labor. We just completed putting together a survey that we'll be sending out to a list of construction and telecom companies under our heading, because ultimately we have the incentive and we hold the carrot and stick to make sure the employers get involved with this program. In our work with the Department of Labor in the past, they've said they haven't been very successful with these, but they anticipate will be very successful because the need is there. So what we're doing now is we're getting this survey out to identify the specific need for each one of these contractors for how many employees they need and they're willing to hire and take on. So they're going to be pulling from this pool of employees that we're developing. Now, none of these companies would be doing this on their own. They don't have the capacity to do this on their own.
I don't know that I agree with you. All right, so, and maybe I don't understand. So, I mean, I think all of these companies have HR departments, right? So these companies that build, I mean, we're not looking at onesie, twosie entities, are we? And maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Oh, we're looking at quite a few onesie, twosie entities
that are building.
Yeah, yeah. This is you look at Riggs Distler. You look at Hustis Cable, the big one. Hustis Cable does not have the capacity to do this. So
Hustis
yeah.
So I think I am not understanding Christine, because I've spoken with Riggs Distler and I've spoken with Eustace in putting, as we were looking at Act 71, and they have some recruitment and training strategies that they employ. And so my question for you is, how is this program intersecting with that knowledge on the ground with the employers? So an answer that I might be looking for is, oh, it's been informed by, the strategies or by the places where they are not having effect. What I'm worried about is that we are working with the Department of Labor on a program that has not been informed by employers themselves. So the fact of the matter is we have a workforce challenge in every single sector, right? And so I think we have to be I'm hoping that what we are saying is, Riggs, what does it take for you to get 10 more people? And my guess is they may have an answer, and Eustace may have a different answer, and how is that kind of rolling up? Is that the way we're building this, or are we building kind of a top down?
So
yes,
there's actually a survey that's going out in the next few weeks, a workforce survey to all of the major employers related to telecom in the state. So that'll be a combination of top down, bottom up.
Yeah, we're actually doing what you're talking about, Laura, as we speak.
Oh, tell me about it just a little bit, not to belabor it, Madam Chair, if we might.
No worries, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're reaching out to, we've had VCUDA put a list together for us, for all of the, we worked with all the CUDs to come up with a list of all the potential employers. We're reaching out to them with a survey with those kind of questions that you're asking to inform us on how to develop the program. The one thing we all agree on is we don't have enough resources, but how to develop the program is exactly what we're doing, starting with the survey. We'll be following up, and actually I should say Vermont Technical College will be following up as well. So we are doing exactly what you're saying, reaching out to the right now.
Okay, I just want to encourage that we center this with the employers and not with the trainers.
Yep, well said. And we have a development team that's doing exactly as you say.
That we are meeting the needs of the employers, not offering a program to them.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Christine, I'm just curious, how did you come up with the 611 number, 611,000 and change?
Well, because the program estimate is that's an estimate of what is needed, and it's an estimate of what we have available. That's to kick the program off. That's working with NEK Broadband and Vermont Technical College. This doesn't get the Earn to Learn program. This actually gets the training program set up for the fiber technicians. Mm-hmm. The Earn to Learn program, this gets to it goes back to your earlier point. This is to provide next year's immediate need for technicians. What we're working on is the following year to have the state lead this program, rather than NEK Broadband is leading the program right now.
Okay.
But Patty, I don't think that answered. You asked, how did the 611 get developed? I didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah.
That was working with NEK Broadband and the Vermont Technical College.
So what's it based on? Is it based on like hours or like?
Yeah, it's based on 144 classroom hours, and it's really based on 144 classroom hours, setting it up, and delivering the training. So to make this program work, they need 144-hour classroom times and 2,000 hours of apprenticeship.
And how does that back into number of bodies going through the program? How many people going through?
Well, our goal is to get 375 people through this program. Okay,
so it's based on 375 individuals. Okay.
So is the way to think about it that the 611 or the 612 in theory will get 375 trained resources available to start?
That's to get 200. That's to get 200 trained resources. 200.
So 300 and change to start, and some will attrition out because they don't like heights. It will end up with 200 and change.
So it's about $3,000 ahead.
VTC estimates, $2,000 per candidate. Now, the reason it's not 750,000 is we anticipate people dropping out early.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do if we don't have enough money in this? I hope that's a problem statement we have to deal with, quite honestly.
Well, we're going to the state for additional funds. I mean, I would, I agree with you, Patty. That's the success means we need more funds, but we're looking at Department of Labor to come up with additional funds.
Okay. Hopefully we get into a pinch point like that and we have to figure out more dollars and more funds for training. I really do hope that's the case and not the opposite. Okay, any other discussion on training and education? Or actually, all we did was the big lion share item in here. Do you want to quickly talk about the other items?
Yeah, the other ends, I think, are pretty straightforward. It's just
Okay.
staying abreast of latest technology. And
Any other comments on this page on item or section 8 of the budget, training and education?
Just
Go ahead.
really quickly, if I could, Patty,
Go
I
ahead.
really support the continuing education for the CUDs. And I'd like to just make sure that we are offering that as broadly as possible. So I see that we only have 6 listed there. I don't know if you're envisioning, maybe the same 6, and our staff is going together. I think Vermont, we have a team here between VCBB and the CUDs. So I like the idea of that education. I just want to make sure that we are trying to make that available as broadly as possible. So maybe we're not providing the full cost and we're making.
yeah, very good recommendation. I hadn't actually thought about matching funds, but that's the way to extend this.
Holly, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry. I mean, who could disagree with Laura on that point? It's great. I don't think that we can underestimate the demand for training in this area for new workers. So I'm really glad that we are headed in that direction. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, anything else on this section? We're going to keep pushing along here. If not, can we go to the next section?
Sure. So now we're at the board costs. Basically, we're talking about per diem, we're talking about mileage, and we're talking about additional days work, 10 days per member. Now, I suspect we're not going to use all this, but I would say to the board, this isn't a big part of the budget, so
Right.
It's an estimate. We're talking about 3 meetings per month. Oh, that's not 17 months, by the way. That should be 12 months. That was a carryover.
Gotcha.
The number's right.
Okay, any comments or questions on this section? Okay, we'll move along, and thank you to whoever the board member is who has indicated they would like not to be compensated. Appreciate that very much.
Okay, so we reviewed the budget. I guess I would look for a motion to approve the 2021 budget with the adjustments that were advised, which is that we remove the project manager expense, and we'll come to that later.
And the other adjustment was a note about the 5 million, that it will be in the budget, but with feedback from the CUDs on that number.
Yeah, feedback from the CUDs with the goal that the CUDs own the infrastructure, that the VCBB does not own the infrastructure.
And the other modification is the 116 million of revenue is anticipated, some sort of flag that's anticipated and not necessarily counted on.
I think any revenue items that are not in hand should be somehow notated that they're in flight and not landed.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to. I was recommending the approval of the 2021 budget. We don't have that issue with the 2021. We have it with the 2022.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think what I'm recommending with the 2022 is we not approve that budget today.
Okay.
I bring that back to you in March when we have better visibility to what those numbers are.
Good.
Okay. Laura?
Yeah, apologies, Madam Chair, for joining a little bit late. I think I missed the revenues and sources, and so I'm not seeing the USF money in here.
Yeah, the USF money is in the, if you look at the operational budget, see the universal service funds, there's 147,000 there.
As a revenue.
As a revenue? and USF fund 552,000 for capital. Says the
So I'm
connected.
sorry.
Oh yeah, that's, by the way, Laura, you did miss part of the conversation. However, we may have missed an important point. I may have missed an important point here. We're recommending that so just let me finish answering your question, Laura, before I go back to what I was going to say. This USF fund will be used to fund we need to get some minor wording changes in the legislation to allow the USF fund to be used for the deputy director position. Rob has received a job reclassification. We'll talk about that in executive session, but he's now reclassified to be the deputy director.
So there's other options with that as well, but we will talk about that in executive session.
But let me just make sure I keep that point clean, Rob. That, right now.
Is that clear?
Let's assume it's clear. And let me talk about the connectivity grants. I apologize for missing this one. This is pretty important before you approve it. We're suggesting that we set aside the balance of the USF fund. And by the way, the USF fund is an annual fund, so we could do this every year. But the idea is because the language of the Act 71 funds is limited to those with universal service funds. This may be a straightforward and simplified way to address some of these unique addresses that are pockets. For example, Colchester, where we can work with an existing provider who provides fiber to incentivize them to provide an additional fund to connect to some of these pockets.
Christine, you're talking about expense. My question is about revenue and income. And so
so the revenue side, 552,000 is allocated from the USF fund for capital. 147,326 for operations for a total of 700,000.
And that's our current estimate of USF revenue for the year.
Yep.
That's a decrease, pretty significant from the last time I think I looked at those numbers. So,
well, it's split between. I think we get like 45% of it, right, and 55% goes to some other existing program. It's in the language is in 71. We don't get 100% of the USF.
Okay. No, I'm aware of that. So
I think the total was like 1.4 something million.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that we are accounting for, that is a decrease in pretty significant decrease revenue for broadband. So I just want to make sure that we are accounting. So a year and a half ago, it was about $1 million. So I would expect that the USF revenues are going down as we're losing phone customers. But that's a pretty good decrease. So I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, I'll take note of that. We got that number from the DPS. So
well, they probably have the right number. So that's I guess the answer that I was looking for.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or discussion on the current year budget?
So Patty, if I could just, I think Christine was talking about we're beginning to describe something that would allow for filling in holes. That sounds like the existing connectivity grant program minus the board, the broadband board, whatever the board was that used to make grant decisions at PSD. So do you envision any noteworthy changes from the existing connectivity grant program and the one that was at the department and what you have proposed here?
Rob, can you answer that question for me? I'm not familiar with the existing program enough.
Sure. Well, there was changes made in Act 71. I think there may be, when we draft the RFP for that, there may be additional changes to make sure the funds are going where they need to go. These may be funds that are, there's a lot to figure out. It was put in there as another option for things that don't fit in any other bucket, but still bring us closer to universal service.
Okay, and so the board would see that RFP prior to it being issued, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we approve the budget as proposed with those changes relative to the project manager being removed and the $5 million seeking feedback from the CUDs.
Second it.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that's a lot of work to pull a budget together. Do you want to now look at the next year budget, or what do you want to do with that, Christine?
I would recommend that we push, you've got the format, you understand it, but I would recommend we not look at that again until we have higher confidence in the 2022 numbers, which will be, let's say a date specific, we table it till March. First
Okay.
meeting in March.
Okay. March. Okay. All right, so next on our agenda, let me get back to the agenda if I can find it.
So actually, before we get there, I just want to note, I noticed a pretty big typo. This is under connectivity grants. It's saying 552,000 would support 2,906 miles of construction. There, I'm
Where's
not
that
good at
set
math, but the math is wrong. D17 on the sheet that's on the screen right now for capital budget for connectivity grants. And we don't believe that 40,000 a mile is accurate anymore anyway.
Yeah, that was meant, I didn't mean to show this spreadsheet, but that was for the 116,250,000, not the connectivity grant.
Rob, do you think the cost per construction or per mile for construction is lower than the 40,000?
I wish I could say it was lower. I think it has gone up.
Yeah, but Rob, that says
bit,
we're assuming $45,000 a mile with 5,000 already funded through pre-construction grants. You follow? If you take,
got it, but
we've already expended 5,000. So if you take the 116,250,000, you divide it by 40,000, you will get 2,906 miles.
okay. 20. Yeah, I was just it just looked confusing up there. So I was
Yeah,
seeing,
it was.
I was seeing 552,000 equals 2,906 miles, and I was like, "What trick do you have up your sleeve?"
No. Thanks. I'm happy. Always feel free to call things out, but I did not. I would have cleaned this up a little more if I realized I was going to show it, but
I'm sorry.
I knew what it meant. No problem.
Okay, so just in the interest of time, let's keep moving on here. Can we move to the construction grant program RFP?
Yes, and for that program, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Okay. Rob, you are up. You want to take us through it, Rob?
Could you state what page?
Sorry, I'm trying.
In the book it starts on?
I'm trying to get there. I was going to bring up the Word document
Oh,
first, but where it starts in the board packet. Hold on. One of these days we can make an index to everything in the board packet. When a little challenging when the minutes are
It's,
Oh, sorry, it might be different on mobile.
Yeah, that's,
Hold on, I'm trying to get
we'll
there.
look to our new executive just to fix this.
How about page 58 in the board packet? But what I'm going to bring up on the screen is actually a Word document, so I can take ongoing notes.
How do we have 58 when you only have 57 pages?
Right.
yeah, and I'm looking at one that
What?
starts on page.
Oh, there was
5.
okay, I sent an addendum and then I merged it together when I put it up online. So if you look at the addendum that was sent on Thursday, that is the only thing in that is the construction grant.
I can't look at the addendum. I can look at the board book at page 5. What are you saying that it has changed?
No, I'm saying there was a separate follow-up email that had that. Like I apologize.
12, yep, on 12/9 at 11:10 p.m. Rob sent out board packet part 2 with a Word document and a PDF. If you open the PDF, I think we'll be.
Okay,
That's the RFP.
I'm sorry for the confusion. I have all my comments embedded in the board packet that is dated 12/13/21. No, sorry, that's today. The part 1. So I will just do my best to follow along.
Okay, yeah, the part 1 did not have the updated RFP. I apologize. I was pretty sick, and that's one of the reasons why I was sending things over at 11:10 p.m. at night.
Which might be why you're sick.
Yeah, that too.
Okay, well, I'm going to open up, and once again, for those of you at home, the complete board packet has been posted to the site. I just merged the 2 documents together. So let me get to pulling this up. This may take a minute.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
As much as Representative Sibilia and I have wanted to come to a clarifying decision about what the meaning of universal service plan is, we have not. And it impacts the decision that the board has already made. And I think it is sprinkled, it's sprinkled throughout the construction grant document. And so I'm hopeful that we can just set aside some time for conversation in the board. We were asked as a little subcommittee to reconcile interpretations, and we have not.
Okay.
Well, considering how that is central to this entire thing, I think the board should make a motion and decide, because otherwise I'm not even sure where to necessarily go. I used what was in the legislation that clearly stated it was on a municipality level or a CUD level.
So I hear Rob, I would appreciate it if you would stop putting your opinion ahead of our conversation.
I'm just reading the legislation. Thank you. But how does the board want to proceed on this question, since it's, I guess, not resolved?
So, to be specific, is that where we have in the Word document, and again, we've got several documents, so I apologize, trying to reference the right spot here. I'm looking at a Word document. The definition of universal service plan, is that the question here?
It is.
Rob, what you have in here, is this from legislation?
Yes.
And I agree with that.
Okay, so as long as the definition is coming out of legislation, we can leave it.
I would like to have a brief conversation, if it can, I think it can be brief, about interpretation of the definition and what its impact will be. So the interpretation that's standing here with Rob and staff is that each CUD and each applicant for a construction grant needs to have a universal service plan. What is that? A universal service plan for providing each on-grid, unserved, and underserved location in a communications union district or in a municipality that was not part of the Communications Union District. So one definition, and I respect Laura's in the room understanding as a legislative drafter that each and any municipality who's coming forward has to have a universal service plan, which would address broadband for each and every location on the grid that's on or underserved. But I don't know whether that means a binding agreement of the providers that they will make that such a plan. I don't know if that means that every CUD has to come forward with a documented, which I have not seen in our prior applications, a documented plan for such universal service that includes the existing incumbent providers service. It's a simple phrase to use, but a complex concept to implement or administer. And we haven't discussed how we will administer it. And we also haven't seen it yet. So I'm concerned, and it really goes back to the grant that we approved for pre-construction grant funding for EC Fiber, where they extended outside the boundaries of their CUD into an adjacent municipality and did so without a universal service plan for the entire municipality. I remember the conversation at the time being, our goal here is universal service and rational use of the funding to get as much coverage as we can. But I understand that there's concern that has unintended consequences for carriers in towns that aren't part of CUDs. So that's my concern, that we will be holding up grant funding because towns can't get a commitment for universal service plans that aren't part of CUDs.
So this sounds like an agenda item we can discuss outside the RFP. The definition in the RFP is from the legislation. Interpretation of that verbiage we can take up at a subsequent meeting.
There's one condition, I would agree with you. There's one issue though, and that is, shall a universal service plan document be required for each and every grant, construction grant application? And I would assume that the answer would be yes. And then we have to discuss what that really means, I guess, separately.
All right, what I would like to do is have a separate dialogue on this. I don't want to hold up the RFP.
But no one will be able to respond to the RFP.
Right now, it's a gray zone, and it's subject to interpretation, is what I would say. You can interpret it one way. I could interpret separate. Laura could interpret a third way.
I'm totally in agreement with you. I just don't know what the plan of staff is. Here we are. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to respond to this RFP in the next 2 weeks, but I don't know what the plan for issuing it is and what it means in terms of applicants responding and meeting the plan requirement, which is everywhere in this document.
One of the things that I'm hoping that we can do is lean on Stan here. Stan being our legal representative, and have him come in with some interpretation guidance for us. Christine?
Yeah, I was going to follow up with along your suggestion, Patty, that we define it. We define it. We really need to have that definition in place by the 15th of January. Now, of course, you can do qualitative decisions on the grant application on the service plan as well, but we do want to prepare the CUDs as much as possible of what definition we're looking at. So we
agreed.
Like I know I struggle, since if people are going to be putting together these applications and staff is going to be making decisions on whether there's a universal service plan, like I know it's just something that Stan has looked at, and I think that's where we would go with in terms of defining what universal service means.
I think that's great. Stan, I want to call your attention to Title 30, Section 3054, as it addresses the CUD's authorization to provide service in adjacencies. And I guess I also want my friends and colleagues here on the board to consider whether or not we would turn down the opportunity to serve adjacent portions of towns, communities, where there isn't a town-wide universal service plan. And that's really the issue.
Okay, Laura?
It's really the format that is not clear. It's by municipality. It's a municipality that is working with CUD, or it's a CUD. And what I'm hearing is it's the technical detail of what do I know? How will I know that I'm looking at a universal service plan, as opposed to what exactly does a universal service plan mean? And so I'd actually like some clarity forward with we're all clear on the definition, which does provide a lot of flexibility, but it's clear about who it applies to, right? So a universal service plan is a CUD for all unserved and underserved addresses in the city, or for a municipality, a whole municipality working with a CUD.
I have to say, I could only hear about 1/3 of what Laura just said, so.
I have no idea why
Laura, your mic works great when you're looking at the screen where your camera is, and it doesn't work great when you're looking at, I think it's to your right like you're looking down and to the right now.
Yeah.
When you look at the screen where the camera is, it's much clearer.
I have no idea what the problem is here. Can you hear me all right now?
That sounds great right there.
So I would like to, I'm hearing is that there is some confusion about what a literal plan will look like. So how we would know that we are looking at a universal service plan, as opposed to what the area is of a universal service plan. So, and I think those are two different things. So I'd like to, I think the legislation is very clear about what the area is of a universal service plan, and there's a lot of flexibility about how will I know that I'm looking at a universal service plan. And I would love to suggest that we focus on the latter, not the former.
I'm going to be honest, Laura. I did not follow that. I don't understand.
Okay, so
the distinction between the 2 points you're making.
So I think that Holly is wanting to understand if, in fact, whole town, if the definition means whole towns, if the definition can work with the powers and duties that were not part of Act 71 that she referenced for Stan around the formation of a CUD. So if we can use that, there's which allows for a CUD to work, adjacent to its district. So a CUD is very clearly a CUD is it is at least 2 municipalities and then infinite number of municipalities. That's what a CUD is. And so a universal service plan applies to a CUD or to municipalities that were not part of a CUD that are looking at a plan for their entire town's unserved and underserved addresses. So my suggestion is that the board leave that alone. I think Holly would like to debate that further, and that we focus our energies on literally what do we know, like what are we asking the CUDs to provide as technical information about covering the towns in their district. So I think there's two questions that Holly has put on the table. One is what is, what needs to be the geography of the universal service plan, and then what are the technical requirements of a universal service plan. And I would suggest the geography of a universal service plan has been defined in Act 71, and we focus on the technical aspects that we want to see CUDs submit in terms of their planning. Is that any clearer, Patty?
Think so. I'm just taking a note.
I'm going to fill in the void here for a moment, Madam Chair, and just say that actually Representative Sibilia and I are closer today in our understanding of this, and I do agree that I appreciate her very astute observation of where the distinctions and overlaps are. So we are in agreement that a CUD is a CUD, and the discussion of universal service means service to locations within the CUD.
No.
That's locations being on the grid that are un or underserved.
For whole municipalities.
Yeah, well, within the district, it would only include whole municipalities, right?
Well, I think you've been trying to make a case for it to be adjacent.
Well, and I do think the only thing that I'm in total agreement with you that all we have to do is know how we want a universal service plan to be described by the applicant. If in the case there is only in one case, only in the case where there is a CUD with an adjacency in a municipality that is not complete, that is not part of that CUD. And I think we have a lot of room to talk about what does it take to meet the requirement of a universal service plan. So if we can move forward on this construction document without having what it takes to show that detail for it won't apply to any of the CUDs that are seeking to do construction grants within the CUD, except they need to know what a universal service plan looks like, to your point.
So are you suggesting that we set aside the question that you have of adjacency and that we focus on the detail of what we want the CUDs to provide for us?
Yes, I support
that.
That's just fine with me because it's going to cover the vast majority, as you've pointed out, of the issues. And then as we get to the point of standalone municipalities and eligible providers that want to serve those standalone municipalities, we can talk more about what a universal service plan looks like in those instances.
So what I'd like to do is put this on Christine's plate to lead us through this issue. And Christine, yes, with that, have Stan do some research, and let's talk about it at a subsequent meeting so that we can move this RFP along.
Madam Chair, can I just make this point here for Christine, is that it's not so much about the definition of the legal definition, but I'm actually have my eye on what's an efficient use of funding and how do we designate routes and what do we have to do to prove universal service? Is it just along a route, or is it we have to get the whole town planned and somehow committed in order to build in a adjacent or in a standalone municipality? That's what my concern is. So I've said enough, and I really appreciate the
intent. Okay, so the intent was Town A and Town B come together to build broadband infrastructure for their town. One of them has a cable company. Both of them have existing legacy DSL phone company providing DSL. And so that two-town CUD would come forward with a plan that says, here are the addresses that are unserved or underserved in this district, which is defined, and here's how we plan to get to them. Pretty simply. And then, you know, we've put some other parameters in there, but, you know, unserved and underserved. So if there are, I think, so that means RDOF, you know, we're looking at the RDOF. But I'm not sure how much more detail we need in there.
And with all respect, I'm just very concerned that we're putting this burden on towns to come up with universal service plans and do the identification of the addresses and so on. I just don't know that they're up to the task, but I don't want to ever doubt a town. Those towns that are interested will find a way, but it's a lot. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And that's why we spent most of the 2019 session developing tools for municipalities to use to work together to build broadband infrastructure. And it looks an awful lot like a CUD.
I also want to note all that data is online of what is unserved and what is underserved.
All you need is a selectman with time to do it. Okay, enough. I concede that we can go forward. I'm just not sure what the applications will look like, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, Christine, can we tee this up on the next agenda? And it would be great if you guys can have some dialogue and give us a recommendation. You're muted, Christine.
It would be helpful if you assigned a working group. Maybe that working group could be Holly, Laura, Rob, and I.
It's the working group didn't come to a conclusion. That was the challenge right now. Like, I think we need, I think, Stan, I know you've looked at this a little bit, but we have a general counsel for a reason. And I think Stan is certainly up for the task of looking at Act 71. And the only direction that we need at this point, since it sounds like we have established that a universal service plan is an entire CUD or an entire town, of what the documentation needs to show. Does it need to be a binding commitment? Does it need to be a letter of support? Does it change from the different stages of the process? But I think we can go forward and return to that. The way it's structured in the RFP right now is for the program shifted a little bit. There's a lower bar for entry. There's kind of like a letter of interest and a pre-qualification stage, which is where we have to decide whether it is a universal service plan and invite a full application. We don't realize with the original draft that we were asking for an incredible amount of information, that would be expensive to produce before we even decided if they were qualified to be in the program. So yeah, I don't know if we want to keep going through everything or if we want to hopefully very quickly decide, like, what is the minimal amount of documentation that's required for a universal service plan.
Rob, I'm going to suggest that I'm going to follow up Patty's recommendation. I think we as staff can come back with a recommendation of what is required for universal service plan and move forward with this RFP. And we've had a lot of discussions on this, and we do see a way that the towns can do this, especially with the fact that we've got a connectivity fund for some of these remote pockets. So we will come back with a recommendation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christine.
Okay,
right, with that, can we dive into the RFP?
Sure. Is it actually on the screen right now, or no? It's not on the screen right now. Okay. No. It was at one point. Let me get back there. I apologize.
Yeah, let me make a suggestion too that, we likely will not get through this by 2:30. And if the board was willing to meet on the 20th just to address this issue. Okay, all right, speed it up, Rob.
Okay, I'm going to speed it up. Is everybody seeing it on your screen right now?
Yeah, do a page view if you can, please.
Okay. Oh, and I'll have to zoom in.
Hey, Rob,
Thank you.
Rob, this is Brian. I have to bounce for 30 minutes. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Thanks.
Okay.
We'll be done by then, hopefully.
Okay, I'm trying to, why am I not
Who do we
getting the
have? So we
page
still
view?
have Laura. We have Laura and Holly on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we still have a quorum.
And
Dan
Dan,
is here.
is Dan still here?
Dan's here too.
Dan?
So,
It is here.
Okay. All right.
So-
Just making sure.
okay, so I'm zoomed in. Can you see this on the screen pretty well
Yes.
right now?
Yes.
Okay, so so a lot of the first part of it was just cleaning up some language based on the comments last time around between underserved locations, unserved locations.
Holly, go ahead and jump in.
The first definition that raises some question is incidental overbuild.
Okay,
And I'm understanding that there's concern among CUDs with a percentage total number of addresses passed issue, because it talks to the density in some areas versus others. Is it possible to use an efficiency question, like incidental overbuild is where the route is made inefficient technically. And really the incidentalness of it is in that interpretation meant to be a situation where people plan a route that goes outside a direct path to and underserved locations in order to pick up more non-incidental addresses in the build. So I just think that 20% of the total number of addresses passed is a difficult formula that could drive not practical construction plans.
So
well,
Holly,
the other thing we have in there is this point-to-point fiber between hubs without drops, and crossing areas with access to wireline connections do not count as overbuild. Since we recognize that the hubs are mostly going to be in the middle of towns, a lot of those towns are served by cable.
And since I read the first version and not the second version, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're looking at
Holly, by the way,
you're looking at an entirely different document where we went back and forth with we went back and forth on the incidental overbuild issue and took into account the comments that are, if you are only looking at the first document, which does not have the new RFP.
I see that now, Rob.
Yeah. Okay. So I was like, I want to go back up to the business plan, but let's see if there's any other questions on there, and I'll see if we can see if Fukuda has any comments on that. But I believe we arrived at a solution, and some of this is going to come into judgment. If we see a plan where you're building out from the town center and then have to serve every single street that's off of that line that happens to be served as cable right now, we're going to have a few questions about whether that plan is focused on reaching the underserved and unserved locations. But if you have fiber that's going by addresses and there's no drops that it's not part of the plan right now for us to have drops on it, that you aren't using our funds to do those drops, that it's not going to be considered overbuild. It'll be incidental.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody else? This was one of the areas we struggled quite a bit on, and I'm sure as we review plans, we'll be going back and forth to some extent, but we wanted to provide some guidance.
So, Rob, you say as a rule. Do you mean as a rule of thumb? Do you mean in general? Is it really a rule?
Okay, I mean in general.
Maybe that's what it should say, so that, I mean, otherwise the people are going to measure.
Okay.
I mean, as you said, it's a judgment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'm gonna just do editing in real time here, which is dangerous, but
That works.
Okay, great. So I want to go back up to the Act 71 compliant business plan. So that is one of the requirements for issuing any funding, for approving any application. It's challenging since the CUDs, almost every CUD went through the Broadband Innovation Grant Program, which required them to come up with a business plan. Then Act 71 added some additional criteria. but determining how exactly this applies to other eligible providers is a challenge that I would love some feedback in. What I did with this definition is I posted everything that was included in the business plans for for the broadband innovation grants, and then added the new requirements in Act 71. But I would love feedback on just how other eligible providers are going to meet this, or what they're going to need to provide, because I'm confident they're listening right now, asking that question.
Holly.
My question for everybody here in this conversation is whether or not there's any indication of what the revenue generation is in the business plan, and so do we get a feeling for what the rates are going to be? And of course, since I'm very interested in low income service, do we need to have an understanding of how take rate is being subsidized, or what the assumption is about subsidies for low income households?
Well, I'd say take rate assumptions are built in there. The amount of grant funding should be built in there based on updates to the plan and the new availability of a lot more funds than expected for this going back a few years.
But subsidies have dropped to $30 a month from $50 a month in the EBB. And I don't know whether the original plan required an analysis of what the how the poverty affects the take rate.
So what I have in the definition is taken from exactly what was required from the Broadband Innovation Grant and exactly what was required in Act 71. If we're adding other things that need to be included in that, we look to the board for that question, but this was based exactly on what was in the legislation.
I heard that. And what I'm really trying to ask my colleagues is, are we confident that this definition provides a measure of viability? If we leave it the way it was, are we concerned that the business plan could be not viable because it doesn't account for a drop in subsidies or the number of low-income households that are going to impact the take rate? Or is that just so incidental that the board isn't going to consider that in the context of the business plan?
In my opinion, especially having gone through developing a business plan, I don't think that level of specificity on the affordability piece is necessary. The first thing you have to do is construct, how am I going to pay for this in general, and the revenue, the expense and the revenue design, big picture. And the elements that Rob has listed in this draft, high-level engineering and design plans, market analysis, take rate, you need all of those components to frame in the business plan. And I get it, Holly, that we need to talk about the affordability piece, but I think, and as we've talked about, the first step is to build the infrastructure, and secondarily, frame in how we support those that can't afford that want to have internet service, want to have high-speed internet service, but can't afford it.
Just looking to be clear on that, Patty, so thank you. I think the real question will be whether we analyze the take rate with any specificity.
But I do think in the business plan phase, it's not necessary there.
All right.
That's just my opinion.
I would agree with Patty. I think that there's room for that there's a sustainability section that could be added.
Doesn't mean we're forgetting groups of people. It doesn't mean that at all. It frames in how is the entity that's building this looking at it in terms of the economics. So personally, I'm fine with what Rob has listed in that section. You just moved off the heading, so I can't read it.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
The business plan section, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I'd scrolled. Thank you.
Patty.
Yes. Laura.
So I am also fine with that. I do think that the information that Holly is referencing is good for us to have at kind of the macro level. So, you know, I don't know if we feel like we're collecting that anywhere else.
Yeah, just, you know, given how much work it takes to develop a business plan,
right,
you don't want to make a secondary business plan just focused on different niche markets and how you're going to plan around that.
Yeah. So, and I'm not suggesting that, Patty. I'm more suggesting.
You can't hear you, Laura.
Cutting out us again, Laura. Laura,
I'm not suggesting.
Laura, do you have a tab over your camera, like a visual tab?
Yeah.
It
No.
may be blocking your microphone.
Can you hear me?
So far.
I'm not suggesting creating a plan for every poverty address. I think that is such a moving target. But I'm suggesting maybe just having asking for kind of more macro level data about the communities themselves. You know, what percentage of their, you know, their town is living in poverty or under the kind of some bigger population level data points, as opposed to, you know, we're going to serve this number of addresses with this level of service at this level of subsidy. So yeah. I do think it's important for the CUDs to just have a sense of that macro level data. You know, again, that kind of location specific data is such a moving target.
Yeah, we do ask for we ask for quite a bit of demographics later on in the application, which would cover that.
And Laura, by the way, you're clear now.
Yes.
Tab thing.
I'm about 6 inches from my screen, so can you see on my floor?
I think it was the paper though, blocking.
Uh oh. Now you cut out again.
Now
though,
I'm
so.
muted. I'm muted.
Oh. We won't guess what you said.
Okay, let's keep going, Rob.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going here. So the outside plant designs, Christine is working with various providers to finalize them. So there's not a new version of that in this right now, but she has taken the direction from the board about speaking with the engineers from the various partners of the CUDs and others to ensure that we're in the right place with this. So funding available, I set 100 million. And it's once again the underserved roads. This will be updated when we're finalizing this, but there is a separate section of this, and this is where, remember, in the budget it was 116 million. We've received a lot of from the CUDs, from towns, of how do we encourage towns to get involved? How do we encourage towns to use some of their own state fiscal recovery funds to have a little additional skin in the game, so to speak, since the amount of money that's currently available via grant funding or looks to be available, it's not going to be enough. And the more grant funding we can get in, the cheaper the end service is going to be for Vermonters. So this is an attempt to leverage our funds a little bit further by setting aside $16 million that will be matched by that be a challenge to the CUDs and a challenge to towns to find the towns that are interested in doing this, get a signed commitment letter to double the amount of money that's available. So any questions on this? This was something entirely new and came from a few suggestions that came in and some responses during a presentation to VLCT, Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
Holly, go ahead.
Rob, we just passed a budget that had 116 million in the construction grant. Why is there a differential?
There is no differential. There's the whole program is $116 million. $100 million of that is the allocation by the roads, and then there's an additional 16 million that is specifically for matching. You get access to it when you find the match. So it increases and potentially it increases the amount of the program from 116 to 132 if you count those funds coming in from elsewhere.
So you've decided that we're going to have a matching program to the tune of 32 million?
$16 million.
Well, I know, but
yeah.
Total 32.
Yeah.
But is there some rationale for why 16 million? I mean, why not put the whole 116 in this? I see this is why you're saying that it's trying to incentivize towns to, or anyone else, to find matching funds. But to me, it's kind of a one-off to arbitrarily pick 16 million and to, I mean, towns would have a benefit of finding some additional funding for any project. Anyone would. I don't understand it.
Part of it was honestly $100 million was a nice round number, and then we had $16 million left in the construction program budget to start. That doesn't mean that we can't adjust that further, but what it does mean is that if groups can't get that match, those funds aren't unlocked right now. So that was one of the reasons why it was kept a little bit lower. I'd like to think that towns across the state are going to contribute, and we like that, but towns have a variety of concerns and other issues to address with their state fiscal recovery funds. We also wanted to limit it by the percentage in order to not only favor towns that are receiving an excess amount, not excess amount, but receiving quite a bit more fiscal recovery funds because they're larger by population. So this was trying to keep it somewhat balanced as we were doing with the formula above, but I'm open to suggestions because, as I said, this was a new thing that we added into this to try to leverage additional outside funds from communities.
And if I was a CUD and I'm not getting construction funding for the entirety of my project because the 16 million is set aside for municipalities, how do you respond to them?
Well, it's set aside for municipality and CUDs by the same percentage. So what you're locking up is whatever the percentage of road miles above, whatever the final number is of that 16 million. So like you could say in NEK, they have about 25% of the funds according to that percentage up there, 1 and 4. So it's $4 million that is locked up until they can turn that into $8 million. So that is a question, and it is also something that we as a board can review and change this RFP as necessary going forward. If we're sitting here in April and that match hasn't been taken advantage of, like, we don't want to leave funds sitting on the table. Or on the contrary, if we get applications totaling a heck of a lot more of the matches, we're gonna be able to address that then as well. This was putting something out there as towns start making decisions and applications start coming in.
Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
So I want to support this. I like the idea of further engaging municipalities. There's no requirement here. I think there are a number of CUDs that are already doing this. There are a number that are trying to figure out how to work with this. I've had a number of municipalities reach out, how do we leverage these funds? And so, if we're able to leverage dollars in this way, so if it works, right? And so have we had any conversations with the LCT? That's another thing I think to make sure that it works to put these funds together this way. But I support this notion. I think it's fantastic.
We've had conversations with VLCT in general on how towns can leverage their funds, but this is an added additional thing. We have spoken to individual towns that what's on the table is, okay, well, we can donate these funds, but what more does it do to the CUD rather than giving them access to just those funds? So it's just an additional encouragement. One other option we could do with this is we could add a kind of an expiration date that these funds are returned to the general pool if they are not used by XYZ. But I think my preference would be addressing that on a as needed basis, because we want to put these funds to use this year.
Okay, Dan?
I'm just curious if a town works with an incumbent and they're trying to pool resources, this might be a very creative way for then these grant dollars to come in, and now you have 3 sources of funding coming to solve an area. And I'm thinking of Bolton in particular, where it's this corner, it's consolidated territory, and I like what I'm trying to say here is leading up to is I like the idea, and hopefully it's wildly successful, and maybe in future grants you might want to increase that if it's wildly successful.
Yeah. And I think as we review these proposals anyway, we're going to be looking for not just towns, but if they are other eligible providers, them having skin in the game.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. I'm not sure if the execution is 100%.
I do like the idea of putting on an expiration date, just in case this becomes very cumbersome. So if it's not, I mean, we might all think it's, the best thing since sliced bread, but if it's not widely used, I'd like to have an expiration date on it. And that way it goes to all the CUDs.
Is that the consensus of the board?
I would agree with that.
Okay. Laura, what do you think? She's nodding her head. Dan, do you agree?
Yeah, I'm indifferent on that. I wouldn't disagree.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Okay, we'll go to the next section.
Go to the next section. Okay. Trying to think of this is all just like standard language. One thing we did update is we had a feedback across the board that 12 months or 18 months was not enough. So we are looking at 2 years, especially considering some of the delays that are threatening things even now.
Mm-hmm.
So applications. So here's where the format, well, actually, no, this isn't. Like, we're encouraging everybody to write as soon as they say they're going to reply, just so we have some more insight into what areas we're looking like. Like, yeah, we fully expect applications from many of the CUDs, but what towns? So anything to give us a little bit more time so we can start investigating what the situation is on the ground there.
I don't understand that. What do you mean by we're investigating what the situation is on the ground? What do you mean?
Well, I just mean if we're going to be reviewing like what it would take for a universal service plan for a certain town, it would be helpful for us to have more knowledge on like, well, who are the providers there? Just to familiarize ourselves, that's all.
And you're saying for those who are not part of a CUD? Correct. Okay.
So it also gives us an opportunity for giving access to whatever if this new system for uploading the different high-level designs and things like that is ready, to send in the login for those types of things. So, timeline. So this is the same eligibility criteria. Once again, I changed it to 24 months. Viable business plan. Conflicting or undermine universal service plan of a CUD. We're going to get to that later on. Industry accepted engineering standards, outside plan, project prioritization. This is that whole long section at the end of the other one that went into a lot of detail. It was just moved up to here.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's where it starts going a little bit different. Like what I talked about at the last board meeting and developed further and received overwhelming support is of having some ways 2 different tracks, but this also breaks it into 2 different steps. So we want to have an eligibility screening pre-proposal. So this is providing less information up front things don't need to be entirely certain yet, but this is where we can decide if a project is going to be eligible. Like if it's a provider that's not an eligible provider and they submits ones, that way this can get kicked out now. If it's an issue where it is very obvious that it conflicts with the CUD's business plan, we can start investigating it and make the decision then, rather than having them to put together what would take many hours and cost some money to put together a full proposal. So it gives us a little more control over the process, and it lowers the gate for getting in to start, but it allows us to say no sooner so they don't waste their time. And I'll go through with that in a second. But it also creates where there's two different pathways, and we tossed around the language a lot. I know the collaborative prop wasn't going to work, so we have a conventional, which is your traditional grant program, and then phased, and these are the differences between the two. So the conventional, it's open to all eligible applicants. If a CUD wants to go this route, they're more than welcome to go this route. For phase, it's only open to eligible applicants that are constructing publicly owned infrastructure. The conventional approach requires a not to exceed price. So they're going to be reimbursed up to that price, and payment only comes in once we certify the network is complete. For the phased version, you need an estimated cost. And in exchange for performance payments, this is where there's back and forth. It's an iterative process to ensure the network and the services comply with Act 71 and the goals of the state. It was going to be performance payments. This is a way to address some of the supply chain issues and some of the workforce issues for groups that are doing public infrastructure that may not have access to the funds they need to wait till the very end. There's going to be more reporting involved for the conventional approach. I mean, less reporting for the conventional. It's going to be quarterly as opposed to monthly. Their detailed design is going to need to be certified by a principal engineer to be in compliance within 120 days of the grant execution. If they don't meet that one goal, they're out of the program. For the phase process, it's a back and forth to ensure all requirements are met. At the very end, they both need to submit their as-built plans and have an on-site inspection for the final release of funds. So it's a little bit of a different process, but it could be more attractive to providers that don't want to have as much back and forth, that have been doing this, that have a plan that's been sitting on a shelf. Did somebody just unmute? There's a big echo now. If you unmute it, okay. So that's the we'll go into more detail, but that's an overview of them. So now let me go back to the pre-proposal eligibility screening. So transmittal letter, talking about their runners, and then there's the certification, and this is where they agree that they understand these principles. We ask this again for the actual application, that they are committed to them. And this is everything you've seen before. I think we added one thing, that everything is true and all information in the proposal is accurate. Pretty basic thing, that you're being truthful in what you're submitting and telling us here. Treasury guidelines, a whole list of things we want them to understand before they apply, because there are all sorts of things attached with ARPA funds, including domestic procurement, which is going to be a challenge. We've already run into it. We've already run into it once and luckily caught it early in the process, that your fiber has to be domestically produced, which is a challenge when there's supply chain issues. Go figure.
So Rob, I heard that was quite a controversy for some CUDs. Is that an opinion that GuideStar has published, or where is it? You know, I'm sure you wouldn't.
It was Guidehouse. It's pretty clear in the federal guidelines, and it's what Guidehouse told us. Yeah, we were explaining the situations, explaining what was happening with the fiber pre-purchase, and what different groups were doing. And as soon as we mentioned that one of these was going to be a company that's not based in the U.S. and the fiber isn't going to be produced in the U.S. That being said, the company is building a factory in the U.S., but at this time it's not eligible. which is going to be a challenge and it may increase costs, but there's strings attached to all funding, as we all know. But by at least having this full list, and I'll work with Stan to make sure there's not other things that they should review so that they understand those compliance issues. Ideally, it's not going to convince anybody to not participate in the program, but they should be aware, and this will assist us with ensuring accountability and ensuring that the funds are being used as they're allowed to be being used. So then we go through, and the sections are the same, but we're not asking for quite as much information, and there's an allowance for a little bit more uncertainty with the pre-qualification stage. So we still want a brief history. We want to know their experience, or their experience of their partners. We mentioned that they've certified that they have a business plan. If they do not, they need to have one by the time that they submit the full application. So this is making them aware of it, and once again, it reinforces what needs to be in it, and it's already defined up above as well. And it's saying that we also have the ability, if we need to require financial information before even inviting a proposal. It's just giving us as much privileges as we need to be able to determine things. So then we ask them what their preferred application process is. We go into the universal service area. So what town or CUD are they planning to serve? If they're proposing to serve a town currently a member of a CUD, we want them to explain what their relationship is. Letters of support confirming this are encouraged. And then it goes into what it says in Act 71 and leaves it to the responsibility of the applicant to convince the board that a full proposal should be warranted if they don't have a sign off from the CUD at this point. It's a very high bar, but we listed the information we wanted them to provide, make a decision of whether it complies, and then there's an appeal process. And this is one other thing that I skipped over up above that I shouldn't have. The way that this is structured is that for the initial screening process to invite a proposal, that would be a staff decision in order to speed the process up. Reviewing the final application and approving any funding, as you might imagine, is going to be a board decision with staff recommendation. But that's a question that I wanted to. That's where staff came down on it as a way to move things along, since this is just, are you qualified? But we wanted to be incredibly transparent about that to you all, of that is in here. So I'm going to pause for 5 seconds here. Okay.
Keep going.
Go on. So if this applicant doesn't like the staff decision, that they're not qualified, or that we say it's in conflict, they claim it's not, they can appeal to the full board. We're required to have appeal processes. Act 71 requires us to have appeal processes for appeal if they don't like the decision of the applicant, the decision of the board, or in this case, the staff. So that's kind of the release valve there. Universal service plan. So this is, we're already asking for some documents to support their commitment to universal service, but it's not quite as strict as what we're requiring for the full proposal. At this point, everybody needs to provide an estimated cost for universal service for the entire area. I see Laura has her hand up.
Yeah, Laura, go ahead.
But you're muted. There you go.
Yep. So page 13 in the second paragraph, the universal service plan. Don't you scroll past it? Yep, there you go.
Right here.
So I wonder about introducing a new concept here, or I worry about introducing a new concept here, which is the 2 words, a plan, which maybe is not.
Can't hear you again, Laura.
So
It wasn't the paper sticky.
right.
Is there any reason why we would not say a universal service plan here?
I don't understand Laura's comment, and I think it's because I can't hear her.
So my suggestion, if people, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
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 my suggestion is that successful applicants will provide a universal service plan and not just a plan. I'm not sure why we would, it feels like it's a different thing. Maybe
Agreed.
that's the legislator in me, but
No problem with that.
Capital P.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Holly.
and then I have a question, which is the time constraint of 5 years. Can you explain why that's included?
I think I just didn't want it to be a situation where it's like, oh yeah, we'll eventually get there. I wanted to put some period of time on there. If 5 years isn't enough, we can say 7, or we can ask them to tell us in how many years. But I wanted it not to be so.
It's
I,
not enforceable anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I support the notion of, like outlining some time, 5, but I mean, what are we gonna do, right, if it's the holiday?
It's very true. So maybe we should ask over how many years, because
Yeah,
that would help us
I
in
think so.
evaluating. So I'll just add a comment here. These are comments for my own good here. Thank you. Anything else on that? Okay. So estimated costs for building out the entire area, all unserved, underserved addresses, other sources of funding, efforts to engage the local municipality or region. So that's what's required for the pre-application phase. You'll notice there's nothing about some of the other Act 71 things. There's nothing about the design, but we'll get there. But I think
Okay, Holly, we'll
okay.
take a pause here. Holly has her hand up.
So notwithstanding the fact that we were going to set this aside to talk about what the universal service plan looks like, I'm reading this as you're scrolling through. Did I read your definition or your requirement for the universal service plan, something about a letter from the incumbent provider?
So I said, for example, an incumbent telephone provider company that provides service to 90% of the town must provide a letter of commitment or jointly apply with another entity demonstrating that all remaining on-grid, unserved, and underserved locations will be served over what time period and how. And this is an area where we can offer a bit more flexibility. But thank you for catching that. And it's also that maybe this doesn't belong in the pre-application, but belongs in the full application, is what I think I would say.
Agreed.
And that requirement, whether it appears here or later, could be a tool for incumbents to not collaborate on applications.
Yeah, that's what's in it for them.
No, that is very true, and that is a concern. That goes back to the concern over wire centers.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we can. Why don't I keep going, and we'll see the same kind of language again when we get to the full plan and look at it there, because it very well may be like, oh, well, the CUD has committed to building out those addresses. So let's keep going here. So full proposal. So we're going to let them know if they're invited to one. If they're not, they can appeal. That was before. So then it goes in the full, and it just breaks it down to there's some different requirements for both of those. As I said, it's stricter for the conventional since we're not going to have as much insight on an ongoing basis. So for the full proposal transmittal letter and proposal overview, there's just additional information. I added in here the total estimated cost for the plan, and I thought I added in for the other one, but just because that's one thing I'm always looking for as we're writing grant agreements, is to have it right up front. I don't know. I'm having some big concerns here. I'm having some really big concerns here. I may have to go to, what the heck?
That's interesting.
That's interesting, and
Looks like your control button was held or something, and now
it's,
Let's try undo, Rob.
I didn't.
Yeah, control.
By invitation. No, did
I have a copy, Rob.
You have a you have a copy. Do you want to send it back to me right now, just to be sure, since
Sure. How
somehow
about
this one
Laura?
may have been corrupted? Or do you want
Sure.
to share your screen, Laura? But it's
Let me
useful
know.
for us to see when you're talking, though. I could also pull it up as the PDF.
I have it up. If you want me, I can share my screen and I can continue to scroll as you tell me if that helps. Just to
That would
keep
be
it.
that would be great, just to keep us going, since I'm not sure what happened here. So I'm gonna not share my screen anymore.
Never. I guess I have to request control.
Oh, really? You should have full control, Dan.
Only meeting organizers and presenters can share.
What? I thought you are you. Okay, I'm gonna make you a presenter. I thought you. Okay, you should have all the power now.
Okay, I do. All right, can you see that screen?
I can see that screen.
Yes.
I'm gonna move you over
right.
here so I can see it better. Could you mind closing the comment section? Oh, I guess unless you need those, and zooming in at the bottom, the button in the bottom. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so you can just keep scrolling. The big difference here is not that they understand, but it's that they are providing written acceptance of everything that's in there. So general information, we want to know more about subcontractors right now. We want to know what they're doing. We want to know that they're going to comply with the certification section, that who is responsible for contract performance. Going into the business plan, we need the business plan. We require the right for, we reserve the right to require additional financial information, just to make sure that we're getting an applicant that can do this. Proposed universal service area, it's broken down a little bit more there. More, I can't remember if in the other section if I did ask for as much demographics. Talk about who owns the infrastructure.
So Rob,
go ahead.
So Rob, here also say successful applicant will provide a universal service plan.
Okay. Just gonna take notes in another screen here now. Hold on. Plan. That's what is that's B, right? Okay. Page 16. Okay. Thank you. So then we go into the universal service plan, and this is once again the 5 years thing. I'll take that out. I'll do that from above there, and this is where we have that example. And what do we want to do with that? Because it is challenging. Like I don't, and that's really that's the challenge I have with not using wire centers. Is there's an ability for an incumbent to block an entire project, but do they have the incentive to block it if it's not going to be areas they would build anyway? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they do.
Yeah, I think they might, because they might want to build it and they're just buying time.
Exactly.
Or they don't want the project company to be in their community for general confusion's sake.
Yeah, and I guess I could see it if it is a third party, if it's not one of the incumbent telephone companies, for instance. So what do we want to do with this? I'm looking for you all with some direction on this, because it's been a struggle.
Laura has her hand up.
Can't hear you, Laura.
Bottom of page 16, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Again, in the universal service plan, just making that a not a plan.
Okay. So then the larger issue, like how much information do we need from the applicant for addresses that may not be within their control. Like it's easier if it is a third party. It's more challenging if it is an incumbent telephone plan that's providing. And we all keep getting hung up on this. So do we want more flexibility in here? Do we not want it to be a binding commitment? Do we want them just to say that those areas are not within their control? If they are, incumbent thing, like what is the?
Yeah, I would give some flexibility in here, Rob. You could say, for example, an incumbent telephone company that provides service to 90% of the town may provide a letter of commitment.
Okay.
Instead of must. Let the proposer send their language into us, how they would accomplish it. All right, Laura, you still have your hand up?
Thinking. So about the level of cooperation that's possible here, and whether or not, the incumbents are going to provide commitment letters. So why?
Can't hear you, Laura.
Weird.
If you speak directly, we hear you, but when the moment you turn at all, and we want to hear you.
Yeah, I'm not sure why an incumbent telephone company will feel committed to providing a letter of commitment. Why they will feel bound to provide a letter of commitment if they're covering 90% of a town.
I can't imagine why they would. And also, I can imagine any third party who's not getting the grant funds not being willing to commit because they don't want to have a public commitment or potential, contractual kind of suggestion that they're going to provide service that they're not already providing.
Maybe the example could be adjusted to better reflect what we're talking about here.
Is it enough to say that the homework exercise is to identify where the un- and underserved locations are within the boundaries of the municipality and indicate what is presently served and what is proposed to be served? And, get us that picture in front of us so that we can have the conversation about what it would take for that applicant to serve additional locations.
We could also ask them to just explain obstacles for serving the entire community. I don't know, but I think that might be back in the first part.
I think that's just conjecture on the part of the applicant.
How about asking the department to weigh in here?
I'm not sure what we'd expect the department to say. They're going to push depends who. There's certainly going to be opinions.
Well, I think if we ask them a question and we tell them what we want to know, specifically, I think they'll give us the answer. So, I know that there's some discussion about, whether or not they're going to include wireless. We can ask for not including wireless. I think if we ask them a question, they will give us the answer. They have.
If you just take the example out here and you make the change that was suggested about applicants not serving all locations may get a letter, it reads differently. and then add language in there to encourage them to describe their situation. And with the department's input, this might come together differently. But aside from that, it seems as though an incumbent could really jam up a small region. And I'm thinking of, like, again, I go back to the Bolton example. It could really jam them up where it doesn't seem to encourage the cooperation around wire centers that overlap town boundaries.
Yeah, May is just a suggestion. You could do it that way in terms of providing a letter of commitment.
Okay. And we still say that the preference would be given to applicants who figure this out. It doesn't mean that we won't.
Exactly.
But
yeah,
it's, yeah, my expectation from the department, it was going to be that they're going to talk about wire centers. But wire centers don't matter if it's not an incumbent telephone company. So
Just change must to may.
Yep. Okay. Should I go on at this point?
Yes.
Actually, I guess you're scrolling there.
you can scroll away.
So I was like, I can't do anything here. So once again, the total estimated cost for the entire area, that's the same. Community engagement's the same. Additional financial support's the same. I think that's identical. The next section is where we talk about the project that they're proposing. This is only really relevant if it's not a single project that's going to serve the entire area at once. So if it's going to take more than 2 years to do it, this goes into like, well, what are the locations to be served? And then is where we go into like whether the not to exceed cost or the estimated cost, depending on the type of applicant. We talk a little bit about drops. This has been an ongoing discussion with Vacuda of like so our goal is to prioritize network construction. So we want the number of drops to be included to be what's like the minimum required for their business plan, unless they want to justify it otherwise, is the framework that we took in here. And we also put a note that applicants are encouraged to raise funds from communities to pay for drops to residents. So those are two areas where I want some feedback from I'd appreciate some feedback from the board, since I went back and forth on this.
So you're looking at number 2 specifically? You're looking for feedback?
I'm looking at the part of number 2 that's at the top of page 18. Yes, right there.
Starting with these.
Yes.
Just reading it.
Because we want them to include the take rate assumptions.
Of course, I have to put in the comment that drops to low income households often cost 3 to 4 times other drops. And so, but being consistent with our sustainability or our thought that we're going to build systems first and address affordability later, I can see why you would go ahead and do this kind of an approach.
I think the approach you have is good. You're asking them to put the assumption in there.
And I think that there is an opportunity down the line to do a high cost fund that's specific for drops that are like means tested. So we're providing those drops to the affordable housing or mobile home parks, and not to $1 million mansions that can find the funds elsewhere. I think there's a way to do that, but not as part of this RFP. Okay. So that's what we have there. Timeline, I'm going to have to change. There's a hangover 18 months there. Will have to be changed. Additional services. Oh, actually, retail pricing. This was one of the things that's if the applicants are proven that are doing the phased approach and where it's an iterative process, we understand that that could change a little bit. They may also not be providing retail service. So we really want to know what is in their business plan and work with them. But for applicants that are going the conventional approach where we're not going to hear from them much other than the reports, we want to know what the retail pricing is serving. So this is for applicants in many cases that are already providing service elsewhere.
Holly, go ahead.
So that was a lot that you just said, Rob. Don't we want to know what the resulting retail pricing will be so that we just have a window on it? Because even if we're talking about an applicant that isn't providing the retail price, we know that they must have an idea or should have an idea of what the resulting retail price to the public will be. Don't we have an obligation to at least look at that? I mean, that's my question to the board.
Yeah.
Don't we have some sort of obligation to look at that?
I don't think at this point in time they would have that information more than just a target.
Well, and I guess it's not very enforceable if they were to deviate from the projection anyway.
Now that could be a question, I guess, for the grant as we write the grant agreement of whether it needs the pricing needs to be guaranteed for a set period of time. But I think that's
pretty dangerous, Rob.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that. We could ask even for the phased approach of what their estimated pricing is going to be. But it's the same thing. But I think for the retail pricing, we want to know what what is the retail pricing, and want them to offer the same or better for these customers as opposed to customers elsewhere.
That's a pretty good idea. What I'm envisioning is the headline in Digger that says, $20 million given to construct a network where retail rates are 4 times higher. And it's, justified by the particular carrier who's on the network because it's so expensive to provide service. Because the retail rate has been separated out from the construction cost. I'm just, I just wonder if we should be documenting in some way at least some parity.
I feel like it might be in terms of conditions that they have to offer that retail rate for a period of time, but I think the language here can be beefed up, and we could make sure that all applicants are providing what their estimate is and what factors, if it's an estimate, what factors go into determining that estimate. Because it's easy for.
Does anybody else on the board have an idea about whether we even want to look at that at this juncture, or is it just such an estimate or such a conjecture at this point in construction? I mean, it seems like you have to know something about it in order to build the business plan.
Yes.
But so wouldn't you say that it's fair to ask what that business plan estimate was?
I think it's totally appropriate to ask them what their proposed retail prices would be.
Yep. Okay. Their retail price, their take rate, all that has to be built in there. It's already been done. So to ask for it explicitly, I think makes a lot of sense.
Agreed.
Okay. So where are we out now? So network performance and monitoring, this is something we would work with phased applicants, but if they're not phased applicants, we want to know exactly what they're doing now. We don't want to work with them on developing that plan. Detailed project budget, same deal if things are being developed. It's estimates for each activity. Any other information? This goes into the next part as the Act 71 considerations. This is the same as previously. Want to know who they're working with? Why? If they're not working with somebody, we want to be like, hey, why aren't you talking to the utilities about this, about the make ready tariff? So resilience.
How fast do you want to go now?
The overbuilding is the same as in the other section. So you can keep going. Sustainability. So this is how they plan to fulfill the overall plan in the required time frame. I guess I'll have to remove the required time frame. I'm saying what time frame. I want them to tell us all the other sources of funding. The affordability, One, this is from the comments of last time. We want to know if they are participating, and if they're not, we want to know why and what other steps that they're taking to ensure the network is affordable.
It won't be called the EBB by the time this is published. It's called the ACP.
So I said or subsequent program, but
Yeah, we might as well put the right name though, since they can't even qualify until they are providers. So.
okay, so we'll put the name of the plan. So attachments, the viable business plan, letters of support required from non-CUDs, documentation of any community matching funds. Once again, saying that we're going to look at, we may review complaints, service quality investigations. We may hear from those towns that there's concerns. We want them to be ready to explain and encourage them if they want to be preemptive about it to do it. We want, the numbering's a little off here, I see. Operating agreements and other partnership agreements. Those are continuing to be a work in progress. We want to be able to review them. Maps, spreadsheets, and high-level network design. I want to specify here, originally we were asking for the full network design, the detailed design. We're not asking for that at this point. For providers going the conventional path, they will need to provide it within 120 days. For the phased approach, it's going to be based like payments based on performance. Request for confidentiality, there you go. Performance, this goes into where I was saying the 120 days of execution. That phased approach, the progress, this is all the reporting, the timeline for construction of network. Oh, I do have, if you scroll up to the page there is something in there that if they're providing service already, it needs to be at the same or better rates. So number 2, right near the bottom of 21. And that was something from the connectivity initiative that I think we should carry on. Like, we want to know what their rates are. We don't want them to be like, oh, we'll build this and we'll charge everybody 50% more. We want them to provide availability on a quarterly basis so we know when addresses are online. And we're also requiring the applicant to notify those addresses that service is now available. That should be something they do as part of their marketing, not something that we have to do. It's not saying we're not going to provide public relations, that the fact that this is built, but Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not scrolling because at the same rates, sometimes I think you could say that a rate increase for a substantial improvement in service quality is a value improvement. And if the rates were low to begin with, I think there are customers out there that would pay a little more for a fiber connected product versus a cable connected product if there were fringe areas. I just want to throw that out there.
I think I might need to specify that's the same type of service. Because I agree with you that this was more referring of like, oh, I offer fiber in this town. We're going to offer it the same price in this town. And we could put a within 10% cost differential or something.
I mean, if there's fiber, the same type of service, if they've already got fiber, they're probably, the CUD's not building there.
Right. Well, there's other eligible applicants though. That's where this is focusing on.
Well, take that for what it's worth as you polish this.
Thank you. Okay. Objection to proposal, negotiations. I think the only thing, if you keep scrolling down, that there's the appeal process is new because that is required. That's asking them like, oh, what grounds are you appealing on? And the board can take it up. They have to let us know within 30 days of rejection. I don't know if we need to, I don't know what the next step is if they don't like our decision. I'm assuming that's probably suing us, frankly. But I don't know if we.
Okay.
So, and the rest is terms and conditions. That is pretty basic things. We're still getting additional information from finance and management and PSD on that one question that I scrolled by just now. If you could scroll up a little bit more. So secondary public funding resources. And I think that's something we need to get from Guidehouse. Like, for instance, I know the USDA Reconnect can be used even if there was an RDOF award in the area. We just want to make sure that there's not any complications there, but that's still on the to-do list for our next meeting with Guidehouse. Proposal ownership and those things Stan is looking into. So that's really it at this point. There'll be like the normal attachment C and all the other ARPA attachments, but yeah. What do you think?
Well done, Rob.
Good work, Rob.
It certainly has come a long way.
Yeah.
The bags under my eyes explain that. So for next steps.
So Laura has her hand up. I'm trying to get to her.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So Rob, on page 20, the service quality investigation.
Okay.
I feel like I would like the last sentence, prepared to explain. We should put just a tiny bit more definition there.
Of how we want them to explain it. Says things we're giving them the option of explaining in advance, but this was more of like, okay, when you come before the board with your proposal, we very well may ask you about it. So you can put it in your application now, or you should be prepared. But we can also require them to explain it now.
So, so my question is, so we have a CUD that's applying for, and they're coming forward with an entity that has a service quality complaint. Like, what is it that, who's explaining what? Was the CUD explaining? What are they explaining? Is it the service? Is it the provider that's explaining?
So I might need to specify, because I would want to hear if they're accepting a partner and their partner has a history of service complaints, we're going to want to know what's going on. So I get that. So I would say we'll add language, adding like who your partner is to, who the provider is.
So actually, maybe I'll just be more prescriptive. So I mean,
Please.
I think we have information about service quality investigations. I think that you know, I don't know all of the service quality investigations that have happened. I know some of them. So I mean, we're actually able to get, you know, information about that. I don't know that that's what we're looking for so much as, why are you working with someone who has a service quality investigation? Like, what is your confidence level? Or why do you feel like that's not material here? Or why do you feel like that's no longer a challenge? And is it, you know, if there's a closed service quality investigation, you know, are we considering that? Is it just open?
I don't know. We don't even necessarily need that in there, and we can just do our own due diligence of finding it out and confronting them. It was more of just raising it that we are going to consider that there might be some challenges.
So I appreciate that. I don't know if that confront is, I mean, we just want to understand that, you know, things are going to work, right? So, and I'm happy with it being in or being out, but if it's in, I think we want to be just a little bit more specific about who we want to explain what.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want the CUDs to, you know, I don't know.
Okay. I could take a stab at it, or if you have specific language, I encourage you just to send it my way.
I do not have specific language, okay. But you know, I am, I'm also happy to have it come out. I'm happy to have us consider that, you know, we should, you know, even if there's or a bad track record in the state. I mean, that's definitely information that should be factored. I don't want to overcomplicate it, Rob, which I feel like I'm doing, but I just feel like there needs to be something after the word explain.
Okay. That is fair. So something, explain what? I can come up with some language. So what are the next steps for the board on this?
So I would suggest that we have, if you could send a red line version of the edits that we did today out, I think we're pretty darn close to taking action on this. I would just want to make sure that we can see changes and put them in red line so we can see what's changed.
We don't currently have a board meeting scheduled until early January. I just want to put that out there.
It seems like that would be sufficient.
I think we're 99% of the way there. I just want to see what the edits look like.
Can I suggest you give a conditional conditional motion that
I need to see the changes because, you know, we're flipping through and making comments. And I think it's like, how is it captured, the material? And I really don't see that. I mean, people know what's in this application if they're listening here today. They can start getting ready for an application. We're not going to hold back anybody from applying between now and January 15th. I think we should approve the RFP that is final.
Well, let me just say that the problem, Rob, is this needs to go through finance and management, right?
Right.
The RFP. So we could have a short virtual meeting. I know you said not the 20th, and I certainly don't want to do it the 27th. I'll be out in South Lake Tahoe, but hey, if you told me that you're going to have a 1-hour meeting to approve the final draft, I'll certainly be happy to get on a video conference. We just have to get this right.
I could meet on the 20th, but for a half an hour to review the red line.
Yeah. Can I suggest that to the rest of the board? No longer, I suggest it would be no longer than an hour.
You're on mute, Laura.
Like a bad joke. If we have a 1-issue meeting on the 20th for this, I mean, I could do it.
If we limit it to an hour, I could do it as well. I have family coming in on the 19th.
Yep, perfect.
And I have family coming in on the 20th, so.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Could we do 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock should work.
Yeah, whatever.
I have, Rob, I'll send you some comments. The process is notably vacant of, I didn't see any speak of security, and I think that's going to be an important part. How is the service provider going to address security of their network?
Yeah, please send over some language on that.
No, I have a bunch of comments that were in the right, but we would never get through them, and I think I can just give them to you. You can incorporate them, then everybody would get.
Yeah, I'll work with you on that, Rob.
Sure. No, that's great. No, that's great, and I can get this together and get it out. There's not as many edits as I feared. Thank you all.
Nice job.
I haven't seen yours yet, Dan, though. So
they're minor. They're except for security, they're non-substantial.
Okay.
All right, Laura, or actually Holly, then Laura.
Laura, your hand is up. That's why. Okay. So I didn't see, but then again, I was looking at the old draft. Do we have to make any reference to the provision in the statute for violations of the grant resulting in, the state taking over any of that stuff? Does that have to be brought forward into this RFP for full disclosure? I know we're hoping to make a change in that, but that change won't be made before this RFP goes out. It's kind of a full disclosure thing.
I believe it is in there under what they have to certify that they understand and agree to abide by.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we added language saying "or as amended."
Okay.
Last time.
And it's just
that is in
reference to X 71.
Yes.
Fair's fair, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, are we all set to move along here?
Okay, 10 a.m.
So I can't make 10 a.m. I can make after 11, but I cannot make 10 a.m. on Monday.
I can make after 11.
Can we do 11?
Can you do 11, Brian?
Yes, I can do 11.
You got it. We'll be done by lunch.
It has to be. And this has to be a public meeting, so I assume it will be warned and all that.
No, always is. Yep. Get it on the website. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Nice job, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, we'll make our staff update really short.
well, I'm almost wondering, well, yeah, I guess we can make the staff update really short. I want to make sure we leave time for the executive session. It's pretty important.
Yeah, I think that's my point. I think
Okay.
the only update you heard that we hired the administrative assistant, and actually, I'm not sure we have any other staff updates here.
We had a pretty major press conference this morning.
Yeah,
how did that-
okay, so that's the staff update.
So, and the press conference was on the deal that we helped facilitate between the Vermont Communication Union District, VSCCU, and the Community Foundation with